Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, money and politics reporter, Kyle Khan-Mullins. Kyle, thanks so much for joining me.
Always great to be here, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
Someone who has really been in the national headlines since the end of last year's Pete Hegseth, former Fox News host, now defense secretary. He became defense secretary, really not without controversy. So I would love to talk about him today. You cover the intersection of money and politics. So you found out his net worth. But before we get into the money, give us his backstory a bit. Who is Pete Hegseth?
Absolutely. Pete Hegseth, definitely, like you said, not without controversy coming into the defense secretary role. Kind of humble beginnings. Started out, he was a middle-class family in Minnesota. His dad was an activities director at the local school district. His mom worked as a leadership coach. He went off to Princeton University, did very well in school. And kind of, you saw the budding culture warrior early on. Budding conservative firebrand early on. He was a publisher of a conservative periodical there, and he would frequently pick fights with the more progressive-leaning student body on campus. There's an incident recounted in one of the alumni magazine articles about him that came out when he was nominated as defense secretary. He actually got into a paintball fight, a public paintball duel with the head of the college Democrats. So that should give you kind of a sense of the kind of guy he was in college at the time.
And so then if you move on a little bit, if you've ever heard him on Fox News, he often talks about his military experience. He also really delves into political conversations. So talk to us a little bit about his military background as well as his political experience before going to Fox.
Absolutely. So he was at Princeton in the early 2000s. This is same time, you have 9/11, you have the Afghanistan war, you have the Iraq war, all happening all at the same time. He actually signed up for ROTC while he was in college. And then after that, he has deployed 3 times overseas since. He deployed to Cuba right after college. He deployed to Iraq a couple years later, and he deployed to Afghanistan. I think it was in 2012. So he's been overseas 3 times, served our country multiple times in uniform. And then separate from that, when he's been back stateside, he did dabble. He tried Wall Street, tried a career as an analyst on Wall Street. Hated it. Writes that it was really, really boring, and he'd rather be stacking rations and munitions and accounting them than trying to figure out debt equity swaps and stuff like that. So just totally hated that stuff. Started working at a number of veterans organizations. These were conservative political veterans organizations that tried to get Republicans elected by arguing that they were going to be better for the troops, better for the veterans. At least 2 of these groups, he did leave. There are some questions about exactly what happened there. You have some evidence of financial misconduct. There's been reporting of financial mismanagement, also potential sexual misconduct, alcohol abuse, these kinds of things. He denies all of these allegations. Used that his leadership at these organizations did very well, that they helped their preferred candidates get elected, but there's been reporting suggesting otherwise.
In President Trump's first and second terms, Pete Hegseth was really one of his most ardent supporters in the media. So talk to us a little bit about what that relationship between the two looks like.
Absolutely. The 2 of them seem to have been pretty simpatico since Trump entered the political scene. This is at the same time that that Hegseth was ascendant at Fox. He started out as a kind of a correspondent and then eventually worked his way up. He became a weekend host at Fox and Friends, which is their very popular morning show. And he's been one of Trump's staunchest supporters while there. The 2 seem close. Hegseth got married. His 3rd marriage was at one of Trump's clubs in New Jersey. And then on top of that, it seems to have gone the other way too. Trump considered Hegseth for VA secretary when he was during his first administration. He was looking to replace the an Obama holdover in that position. And ultimately decided on someone else, but that kind of gives you a sense that he was on Trump's radar. And then after Trump left office the first time in 2021, Hegseth continued to be a very strong proponent of Trump in the media and a very strong conservative voice in media. He wrote multiple books during this period. We can talk a little bit more about that. The 2 have been very close.
He's written books. Was one of the weekend hosts on a very popular show. So I'm curious on how much he's worth. You float in your headline, it is less than you might think. So first, give us the number. What's his fortune look like?
So we estimate that Pete Hegseth is worth about $3 million. And I will say at the outset, that's pretty good, especially for a guy his age, he's in his mid-40s. That's pretty darn good. It's far more than the median American his age. But for reasons that I think we're going to get into, his share of that fortune is actually much smaller than you might think. And it's smaller than what you would think based on the amount of money that he was making from Fox, from his books, from all of his various ventures.
So let's start with those books. He wrote a book on the military. So what are some of those views he espouses, especially when we're looking at him now as the defense secretary?
So he argues in his most recent book, which came out in 2024, that the military has kind of fallen victim to woke ideology. He calls it an anti-warrior ethos, and he's promised in his nomination speeches and that kind of thing that he wants to bring the warrior ethos, quote unquote, back to the Pentagon. Basically, he's arguing that U.S. soldiers are held to too high of a standard. They're fighting people who don't play by the rules, so we shouldn't have to play by such stringent rules either. He has publicly defended soldiers that have been accused of war crimes. So that's been one sort of prominent aspect of his career in this space. That's the basic idea. He wants to root out DEI, root out the woke ideology, root out progressives from the military, and replace it with what he would describe as sort of a lean, mean fighting machine.
And he also was a prominent Fox News star, as you and I have discussed, one of the weekend hosts of Fox and Friends. How much was he making there?
According to his financial disclosure that he filed when he was nominated as defense secretary, his salary looks to have been over $2 million a year in the last couple of years.
That's not bad. So did he have any other sources of income?
Yeah, I wish I was making $2 million a year. He did have other sources of income, though. He also was making millions of dollars. He's written 5 books since 2016, and some of those have gone on to be bestsellers. He wrote one about progressive ideology taking over college campuses. He wrote this War on Warriors book. He's written other books that focus on military advocacy and just about conservative ideology in general. And some of those books, like I said, have done very, very well. New York Times bestsellers, that kind of thing. So he reported several million in income from those, potentially, depending on the range that you look at on the disclosure. And then he also had, he declared $900,000 in income over the last 2 years from speeches. So he's going around the country giving speeches about this kind of stuff as well.
You said earlier that his net worth is $3 million, but you teased that it's not all of his. So how much of his net worth is his compared to his wife's?
Yeah, so at Forbes, when we value people, a couple is one unit, right? So a husband and wife, we value them together, they're the same unit. So whether the money comes from one side or the other, if one person's a billionaire, they're both billionaires. That's kind of how we think about this. With that said, so same thing with politicians. Pete Hegseth is married to Jennifer Hegseth, and so we count their wealth as one unit. However, I think this is important, most of the assets that we see on the disclosure, about 2/3 we estimate, are actually Jennifer's. And that's not really what you would expect given their income differences. Now, Jennifer's had a long time career as a producer and executive at Fox. She looks like she's been diligently putting money away in retirement accounts, exactly what you'd expect from somebody who had worked their way up the ranks at a major corporation over several decades and was putting money away. Like that all looks exactly like what you'd expect. Pete Hegseth was making, we assume, a lot more. He's certainly making very generous salaries, and he has all this outside income from books, from speeches, etc. But his net worth is not very. His slice of it, based on what we can see on the disclosures, just isn't that large. It's about $1 million.
So let's talk about where exactly that money went, because just from his Fox role alone, you're saying he made about $2 million a year. And you write this for Forbes, quote, "A look back at his life also turns up episodes of impulsive decision-making and possible financial mismanagement." You and I talked about this at the very beginning of this conversation, but he really faced an uphill battle trying to get confirmed to be defense secretary. And those could be divided really into multiple buckets. First, his multiple alleged infidelities, then alleged sexual assault and inappropriate workplace behavior, and also financial mismanagement allegations. So talk to us about those buckets and how much each you think or you're reporting cost him.
Yeah, it's hard to put a dollar number on all of these, right? Alcohol abuse, financial mismanagement. Not all of these things are 100%. We can tie down the exact number, but what we do know is that there are a lot of allegations from basically everywhere he's worked that he's kind of a party boy. That there was potential sexual misconduct, potential alcohol abuse, potential financial mismanagement. These are things that pop up throughout his career based on the reporting that's come out since he was nominated as defense secretary. What we can do is we can put a rough dollar number on the alleged infidelity that he talks about. And I should note, actually, he denies basically all of these allegations. It's a little unclear if he denies the infidelity, but he denies basically all the other allegations that I mentioned, the alcohol abuse, the sexual misconduct, all that kind of stuff. We do know that he's had 2 divorces, and based on a Forbes review of the court documents in those cases, as well as the reporting that's been done about those cases, it looks like both of those divorces were due to infidelity. He's on his 3rd wife now, and it looks like both of those divorces happened because he cheated on his previous 2 wives. And so we also know that his 2nd divorce seems to have cost him a lot of money. This is in 2017, 2018, so this is after he has become a weekend host at Fox and Friends. He's making a lot of good money, and we estimate that it cost him around $1.3 million between spousal maintenance payments, child support. He was expected to cover the costs of their kids' private school attendance, all this kind of stuff. All of it adds up to at least $1.3 million since 2017.
Kyle, normally people don't go into serving in the federal government for the finances, for the salary, especially when you were making a $2 million a year salary as a morning show host. So how much is Pete Hegseth making now as defense secretary?
He's making about $230,000. That's the salary for all the cabinet level officials in the government. And that's about a 90% pay cut from what he was making at Fox. And let's keep in mind, he also can't give paid speeches while he's defense secretary. He can't sign new book deals while he's defense secretary. And he probably has a new expense. He's got to have a residence somewhere in D.C. Donald Trump has ordered all officials back to the office. So he can't be working remotely from Tennessee while he is defense secretary. He's going to need new lodgings there. So, there are plenty of people go into public service and they make a lot less than they could in the private sector. Pete Hegseth is no exception. But I think the notable thing here is if these financial mismanagement allegations from his past and this other kind of impulsive decision making that we see, the infidelity, alcohol, alleged alcohol abuse, all this kind of stuff, if that stuff is true, and again, he denies it, then a major drop in his income could spell financial trouble for him down the road. We just don't know.
Kyle, per usual, I appreciate your reporting. Thanks for joining me.
Always great to be here, Brittany. Thanks again.